Have you ever felt that invisible forces are guiding your thoughts, your decisions, and even the very path of your life, yet you cannot see them or name them? Imagine for a moment that behind every inspiration, every fear, every impulse, there are two subtle powers quietly shaping the human soul. One whispers of ethereal dreams and lofty ideals, tempting us to lose ourselves in imagination and illusion. The other presses insistently toward the material world, urging precision, calculation, and mastery over reality, yet often at the cost of warmth and empathy. Rudolf Steiner, the founder of Anthroposophy, called these forces Lucifer and Ahriman, and he warned that they are not mere allegories or myths. They are real spiritual beings, intimately involved in the evolution of humanity. Lucifer, the light-bringer, can elevate us to heights of imagination and spiritual insight. Ahriman, the force of cold, calculating materialism, can ground us in practicality and technical skill. Yet both, when unrecognized, can dominate and distort our inner life. The human soul is caught in their subtle dance, teetering between ethereal intoxication and rigid materialism. The challenge Steiner posed was not to defeat one or the other, but to awaken consciousness to their influences, to develop the inner strength, to navigate the world with awareness, wisdom, and moral clarity. Understanding these two powers is more than an intellectual exercise. It is a path to freedom. To see the spiritual forces at work within and around us transforms everyday life. Suddenly, the mundane becomes meaningful, challenges become opportunities, and the inner world is revealed as a living landscape where conscious choice shapes destiny. By the end of this journey, you will begin to perceive the hidden currents behind your thoughts, decisions, and actions, and perhaps glimpse a new way to participate in the evolution of your own soul. Lucifer, in Rudolf Steiner's vision, is not simply a demon to be feared or a myth to be dismissed. He is a radiant, seductive force whose essence is light, fire, and inspiration. Yet this very light, if untempered by earthly awareness, can blind the soul. Steiner described Lucifer as the spirit who tempts humanity toward excessive spiritualization, drawing us away from the grounding realities of the physical world. He is the one who whispers of limitless ideals, of extraordinary visions, and of the intoxication of unattainable perfection. His influence is the source of our soaring imagination, our creative impulses, and our yearning for higher truths. In this sense, Lucifer's presence is not inherently harmful. He can ignite the flames of art, philosophy, and spiritual aspiration. Without him, humanity would remain blind to the higher dimensions of existence. Yet, as Steiner warns, the danger of Lucifer lies in imbalance. When his light becomes unchecked, it creates illusions, exaggerations, and a subtle detachment from reality. One might pursue ideals so fervently that the demands of daily life and social responsibility are neglected. Enthusiasm may transform into arrogance, inspiration into delusion, love of the spiritual into disdain for the material. In modern life, this influence appears as obsessive idealism, fanatical beliefs, or a preoccupation with fantasies of escape, whether through mysticism, entertainment, or intellectual abstraction. People feel a restlessness that drives them toward experiences that promise ecstasy, but deliver little grounding. Steiner emphasized that the human soul's task is to recognize this force consciously. By becoming aware of Lucifer's presence within our thoughts and emotions, we learn to temper inspiration with practical action, to balance spiritual longing with earthly responsibility. This conscious acknowledgement transforms the very nature of our inner life. What once seemed like a chaotic, uncontrollable longing for the extraordinary becomes a source of disciplined creativity, ethical insight, and genuine spiritual growth. Lucifer, then, is a teacher disguised as a tempter, if we can meet his fire with conscious discernment. If Lucifer represents the pull toward ungrounded inspiration, then Ahriman embodies the opposite extreme, the chilling force of materialism, calculation, and rigid intellect. Rudolf Steiner portrayed Ahriman as the spirit who seeks to bind humanity to the world of matter, to lock thought into mechanical patterns, and to replace living experience with formulas, schedules, and control. Where Lucifer tempts with ethereal heights, Ahriman seduces through cold certainties, technological mastery, and the illusion that everything can be measured, predicted, and controlled. His power is subtle but pervasive, appearing in the compulsion to quantify life, in the desire for power over nature, and in the elevation of intellect above warmth, empathy, or moral intuition. In the modern world, Ahriman manifests in countless ways. It appears as our obsession with technology, the compulsion to optimize every aspect of existence, and the cultural worship of efficiency, statistics, and economic growth at the expense of spiritual awareness. It thrives in environments where human beings are treated as cogs in a system, where emotion is dismissed as irrational, and where relationships are governed by utility rather than empathy. Steiner warned that under Ahrimanic influence, people may achieve extraordinary technical or economic accomplishments, yet feel a deep emptiness within. The soul's warmth, creativity, and moral intuition become suppressed beneath layers of rationality and control. Yet Ahriman's presence is not entirely destructive. It is also necessary for human evolution. The development of intellect, practical skills, and the mastery of the material world are essential for progress. The challenge, Steiner emphasized, is to recognize Ahriman's influence consciously, so that one does not become enslaved to matter and calculation. By cultivating awareness, warmth of feeling, and moral imagination, the human being can transform Ahriman's rigid energies into disciplined, conscious action that serves both material and spiritual life. In essence, understanding Ahriman allows us to navigate the cold currents of modern existence without losing the light of our inner humanity. Lucifer and Ahriman do not act in isolation. Their forces are entwined in a subtle and continuous dance within the human soul. Rudolf Steiner emphasized that life itself is a stage upon which these two powers play out their influence, sometimes in opposition, sometimes in a deceptive harmony. The human being is caught in this inner battlefield, often unaware that every choice, every temptation, and every fear is shaped by these spiritual currents. When one leans too far toward Lucifer, Ahriman's counterforce appears, grounding or even suffocating the soaring aspirations. When one succumbs entirely to Ahriman, Lucifer emerges as a spark of rebellion, a call to dream, to imagine, to escape the rigid constraints of cold calculation. This interplay is the hidden engine of both personal and collective destiny. In history and culture, the influence of these powers is unmistakable. The soaring ideals of Renaissance art and philosophy bear the mark of Lucifer's light, while the mechanization and industrial rationalism of the modern age reveal the pervasive shadow of Ahriman. Steiner suggested that the evolution of civilization itself is a reflection of the human struggle to mediate between these forces. At the individual level, the interplay becomes visible in the tensions of daily life, the yearning for inspiration and freedom counterbalanced by obligations and the demands of reality, the desire to dream interwoven with the need to act practically, the pull toward imagination checked by intellectual rigor. This inner battle is not meant to frighten or paralyze. Rather, it is an invitation to conscious awareness. By recognizing the push and pull of Luciferic and Ahrimanic forces, the human soul gains the capacity to navigate its own development with intention. Steiner taught that the true path of spiritual growth lies in this conscious engagement, in learning to balance inspiration with responsibility, imagination with discernment, and freedom with grounded action. The battlefield of the soul, once understood, becomes a field of opportunity, where each encounter with these forces is a lesson in self-mastery and conscious evolution. The human soul is uniquely vulnerable to the influences of Lucifer and Ahriman, not because these forces are inherently malicious, but because we often live in unconscious habit, unaware of the spiritual currents shaping our inner life. Steiner explained that susceptibility arises when thinking, feeling, and willing are not harmonized within the individual. If we float through life guided solely by imagination, we become prey to Lucifer's seductions, chasing illusions, ideals, or spiritual intoxication that disconnect us from reality. Conversely, if we rely only on intellect and control, we fall under Ahriman's dominion, mechanized, rigid, and detached from warmth, empathy, and the soul's intuitive faculties. Humanity's freedom is not given. It must be consciously earned through vigilant self-awareness and moral courage. Steiner urged that the development of free, conscious thought is the human being's most powerful defense. By observing our impulses, questioning our assumptions, and distinguishing between immediate reaction and deliberate choice, we create a space in which Lucifer and Ahriman can no longer manipulate us unconsciously. This inner space allows imagination to be tempered by judgment and intellect to be animated by ethical insight. It is a practice of awakening, the recognition that each thought, feeling, and action is a point where spiritual forces intersect with human freedom. Practical cultivation of this awareness involves more than mere reflection. Steiner recommended disciplined exercises of meditation, self-observation, and inner contemplation. Even brief moments of conscious pause, where we notice the subtle tug of desire, fear, or ambition, can illuminate the hidden influences at work. In everyday life, we begin to see how decisions, relationships, and creative endeavors are affected by these forces. With this clarity, the human being gradually learns to navigate the currents of Lucifer and Ahriman, not as a passive vessel, but as an active participant in one's own spiritual evolution. The process transforms ordinary experiences into lessons, obstacles into opportunities, and unconscious tendencies into conscious mastery. Once we recognize the subtle presence of Lucifer and Ahriman within ourselves, a remarkable opportunity arises: the chance to transform their energies into forces for conscious spiritual growth. Rudolf Steiner taught that these powers are not to be banished or suppressed. Rather, they are to be understood and consciously redirected. Lucifer's flame, once untamed, may have scattered our thoughts in endless flights of imagination, yet when guided by awareness, it can illuminate profound insight, inspire creative work, and awaken moral imagination. Similarly, Ahriman's cold rigor, which can constrict life into rigid patterns, can, when tempered by conscious warmth, become a source of disciplined action, clarity of thought, and purposeful achievement in the material world. The key lies in conscious engagement rather than avoidance. Steiner suggested that conscious work with these forces requires a combination of self-reflection and active cultivation of inner faculties. We must learn to observe our own responses, noticing when we are being drawn toward illusion or ensnared by rigidity. With this awareness, we can choose how to respond rather than react instinctively. Imagination, enthusiasm, and creativity become tools of illumination rather than instruments of distraction, while intellect, order, and practicality serve not as prisons, but as instruments of conscious realization. In this way, the very forces that once threatened our equilibrium become allies in our spiritual development. Practical exercises can support this transformation. Steiner encouraged meditative contemplation, ethical reflection, and artistic engagement as means to harmonize the soul. By consciously engaging with our thoughts, feelings, and intentions, we create a living dialogue with these spiritual currents, shaping them instead of being shaped by them. Over time, challenges that once seemed burdensome reveal themselves as invitations to growth, and the tension between imagination and intellect becomes a dynamic energy that fuels conscious evolution. In this delicate balance, the human being discovers the profound truth Steiner emphasized: that spiritual freedom is not the absence of challenge, but the conscious mastery of the forces that seek to influence us. In the modern world, the interplay of Lucifer and Ahriman has become increasingly visible, yet often unnoticed. Technology, social media, consumer culture, and ideological movements all provide fertile ground for these forces to operate subtly within our lives. Lucifer's influence is reflected in the constant bombardment of images, stories, and ideals that stir longing, imagination, and emotion, often without offering grounding or practical resolution. Ahriman's presence, on the other hand, is seen in the relentless drive for control, efficiency, and measurable outcomes, where human warmth and moral consideration are frequently sidelined. The tension between these powers shapes not only individual lives, but also the collective evolution of society. Rudolf Steiner emphasized that unconscious surrender to either force strengthens its dominion. A person absorbed in endless fantasies or ideological fervor becomes a vessel for Lucifer, drifting further from reality and practical responsibility. Conversely, one who succumbs entirely to materialism, rigid thinking, or mechanistic habits becomes an instrument of Ahriman, disconnected from the higher dimensions of soul life. Yet Steiner also offered hope. Awareness and conscious effort allow us to engage these forces intentionally, transforming their influence into a source of balanced growth. Modern humanity faces a profound challenge: to navigate the extraordinary technological and cultural landscape without losing the essence of its spiritual nature. The path toward balance requires deliberate cultivation of inner life. By consciously observing impulses, distinguishing between superficial desires and authentic needs, and fostering warmth, compassion, and moral imagination, we can redirect the currents of Lucifer and Ahriman. Each interaction with modern life becomes a laboratory for self-awareness, where the tension between inspiration and calculation can be consciously integrated. In recognizing these forces as living realities within and around us, we discover that spiritual freedom is not a distant ideal, but a daily practice, a subtle art of maintaining balance amid the extremes of the contemporary world. Integrating the knowledge of Lucifer and Ahriman into daily life is less about grand gestures and more about subtle, continuous awareness. Rudolf Steiner taught that the soul grows not only through extraordinary experiences, but through attentive engagement with the ordinary moments of existence. Every conversation, decision, and action carries the imprint of these two spiritual currents. By observing how our thoughts and emotions are influenced, how a sudden enthusiasm may be tinged with illusion, or a rigid plan may suppress warmth, we begin to recognize the forces at work and the choices available to us. This recognition transforms mundane experiences into conscious exercises of spiritual freedom. Practical application begins with self-observation. When we notice our mind racing toward unrealistic ideals or fantasies, we can gently ask whether we are under Luciferic influence and seek to ground ourselves in reality without extinguishing inspiration. Likewise, when our actions become mechanical, overly analytical, or detached from human empathy, we can pause and invite warmth, creativity, or moral reflection, thereby meeting Ahriman with conscious awareness. Steiner emphasized that even small daily efforts, pausing before reacting, reflecting on motivation, or cultivating inner stillness, strengthen the soul's ability to navigate these currents. The subtlety of this work is essential. Neither force can be confronted with aggression or suppression. They require delicate recognition and transformation. As we practice conscious engagement, life itself becomes a teacher. The tensions, challenges, and impulses that once seemed burdensome or confusing reveal themselves as opportunities to cultivate discernment, balance, and moral imagination. In this way, the soul gradually learns to dance with Lucifer and Ahriman, not as masters over it, but as conscious partners, and each day becomes a step toward self-mastery, spiritual clarity, and authentic freedom. Rudolf Steiner provided concrete methods for cultivating the inner life so that the influences of Lucifer and Ahriman could be transformed into allies rather than adversaries. These spiritual exercises are not abstract or esoteric. They are practical tools for daily life, guiding the soul to greater awareness, balance, and integration. One central practice is meditative observation, in which the individual quietly observes the flow of thoughts, feelings, and impulses, noting without judgment the subtle ways Luciferic or Ahrimanic energies manifest. This cultivates a heightened self-awareness, allowing the soul to recognize temptation and rigidity before they take control. Another practice Steiner emphasized is the development of ethical imagination. By consciously envisioning moral and virtuous actions in daily situations, one strengthens the soul's capacity to act freely and wisely. This is not mere daydreaming, but deliberate cultivation of inner faculties that bring warmth to intellect and grounding to inspiration. Artistic engagement, whether through painting, music, writing, or other forms of creation, is also a powerful tool. It allows the human being to channel the fire of Lucifer into constructive creativity, and to temper the cold rigor of Ahriman with the living presence of beauty and expression. Finally, rhythmic and contemplative practices support integration. Daily reflection, meditation on moral maxims, or even walking in quiet awareness can harmonize thinking, feeling, and willing. These exercises develop resilience, enabling the soul to meet challenges with clarity and balance. Steiner reminded us that progress is gradual. The cultivation of inner life is a lifelong journey where patience and persistence are essential. Through consistent practice, the human being begins to experience the subtle joy of conscious engagement with spiritual forces, transforming ordinary life into a laboratory for inner growth, and learning to navigate the currents of Lucifer and Ahriman with discernment, courage, and freedom. As we draw this exploration to a close, it becomes clear that understanding Lucifer and Ahriman is not a distant intellectual pursuit, but a deeply practical guide for spiritual living. Recognizing these forces within ourselves illuminates the hidden currents of thought, emotion, and action that shape our lives. Lucifer teaches us the heights of inspiration, imagination, and spiritual longing, while Ahriman challenges us to confront material reality, discipline, and intellect. Both, when consciously engaged, become indispensable allies in the cultivation of moral insight, creative vitality, and spiritual freedom. Steiner's guidance reminds us that the soul's evolution is not the absence of struggle, but the conscious mastery of the forces that constantly seek to influence us. In daily practice, even small steps can transform life profoundly. Pausing to observe impulses, reflecting on choices, cultivating warmth alongside intellect, and channeling imagination through ethical and creative action all serve to harmonize these polarities within the human being. Over time, what once felt like inner tension or conflict becomes a dynamic, energizing dialogue, a continuous opportunity to act with awareness, purpose, and courage. The challenges of modern life, from the rapid pace of technology to the pressures of materialism and ideological extremism, are no longer obstacles, but invitations to awaken the soul. We invite you to make this journey your own. Share your reflections, experiences, and insights, and recognize that this path of conscious engagement is part of a shared human quest. By cultivating awareness of Lucifer and Ahriman in daily life, you participate actively in the evolution of your own soul and the broader spiritual development of humanity. Subscribe, engage, and step into this conscious journey with the understanding that every observation, every choice, every act of moral and creative discernment is a brushstroke on the canvas of your spiritual life. In doing so, you join countless others walking the path of inner freedom, balance, and enlightenment, a path Rudolf Steiner illuminated so vividly for us all.